All right. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another edition of Beyond UX Design Live. I'm Jeremy. I got Sally Carson here today, and we're going to talk all about enterprise software and dispelling some of the myths and taking those misconceptions to opportunities. So, this is your first time joining us on a live. Welcome. Super stoked you're here. Before we get started, I'd love to know where everybody is hanging out with us from. So, drop a note and tell us where you're watching from in the comments, either LinkedIn, YouTube, and all that stuff. We should be able to see it. Last time we had some technical difficulties with LinkedIn comments, but hopefully it works this time. I don't know. We'll see. So real quick before we start, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Wix. If you've been sitting on building your new website, Wix Studio can help get you there faster. Wix Studio is a powerful platform that lets you create and manage websites easily. And with Wix Studio, you can quickly adapt designs for every device, reuse assets, and my favorite, export from Figma, and much more. So check out beyonduxdesign.com/Wix to start creating today. And I've got one more special treat for you. Stick around until the end to master all things that they didn't teach you in school with an exclusive $20 off your copy of Beyond UX Design, Master Your Craft, Beyond Pixels and Prototypes. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty for all their support. And if you want to join all those fine folks, many others, and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're released. And you can get instant access right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. So Sally, I'm so excited to have you on today. How's it going? Thanks for hanging out on a live. This is like, I think, our sixth one that I've done. And I'm
Awesome. What's
happy to
up,
have you here.
Jeremy?
What's going
Yeah,
on?
I'm
All right.
excited to be here. I
So,
do see some comments
yeah,
coming
right
in
on.
about the location.
Ooh, look at that. Yeah, hell yeah. All right, cool. Well, I am really excited. So if you haven't listened to the episode with Sally, that's okay. I'm going to introduce her real quick. For product designers seeking an edge, Sally Carson offers a wealth of experience from the front lines with 25 years, with a 25-year career spanning companies like LinkedIn, Cisco, Yahoo. She's got her own VC-backed startup now. She's led design teams through every size and stage. And now Sally is paying it forward and coaching designers with the invaluable wisdom that she wishes that she had early in her career. And Sally wants to help you find the happy path for your career. And that's what we're going to do today. So Sally, thanks so much for hanging out. I'm really excited. So we talked a little bit in the episode, some cool things that we want, some things we want to talk about. Before we get started, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody some of the things you want them to ask questions about. We've got some questions that people submitted earlier, but go ahead and let us know what you want to talk about today. And then
Sure.
for everybody listening out there, go ahead and you can start getting your questions in, and then we'll kick it off. So go ahead and tell us what you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I love just strategizing, talking about career, growth, how to accelerate your career as a designer. Um, I think I often think about it as the first decade of my career. I was an individual contributor, I was a designer, and I was kind of making all these mistakes that I could have avoided if I knew a little bit more about developing organizational awareness, how to navigate politics, how to work with bad bosses or ineffective leadership and still grow your career. So I know these it's very like case by case basis. It's very situational, which makes it great for like a live Q&A. It makes it a little trickier because folks might be reluctant to say like, "Hey, I've got a bad boss." You're like live on the
Yeah.
air. But any kind of
Especially
career
on
advice.
LinkedIn where we have everything tied to your,
Yeah.
your company.
It makes it tricky, right? But that's also why I do one-on-one coaching for those more private conversations. But yeah, anything where it's like, hey, let's roll up our sleeves and strategize about how to grow your career as a designer. I think probably most of what I'll talk about is not even design specific. It could be anybody who's in product development and R&D org. And our podcast, we talked a lot about,
Yeah.
what's the benefit of spending a chapter of your career in a larger scale enterprise organization, and how can that help diversify your experience as a designer? So happy to get into anything around that as well.
All right, I love it. Let's see. So we've got some questions that came in earlier. So we're gonna go ahead and kick it off because we got a few and we only have an hour. So I'm gonna jump right into it. I tried to organize these questions in 4 buckets, and I'll give you the option to pick which topic you want to kick off
Okay.
first. But I've got like kind of large enterprise stakeholder management questions. I've got questions about career growth and leadership. I've got questions about LinkedIn profile stuff, showing off your work, portfolio kind of stuff, and then workplace dynamics and active conflict resolution, which is kind of interesting. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. We also talk about the happy path of design, but what happens when that breaks down? So,
Uh-huh.
poison. Out of the four, which one you want to dig in first? Any specific
Oh
thoughts?
man. Okay, I'm taking notes. I would like to jump straight into conflict resolution because that's really juicy and
Okay.
tricky, and it's inevitable. It's inevitable for everybody at work and
Yeah.
at
Yeah. Yeah.
home probably too.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is a pretty good one. So this is from Miguel. So
Okay.
Miguel asked, "How do you deal with office politics while maintaining your integrity and your focus on
Ooh.
your own work?" Right. So a lot of
Yeah.
enterprise. So I'm inferring here. I'm projecting maybe, but you have a lot of people, big orgs. You don't always agree with everybody. So a lot of conflicting opinions. But he's specifically thinking about when you're not happy with what's going on. Somebody else is maybe
Mhm.
being petty. The culture's not ideal, not necessarily
Yeah.
like that happy path kind of maintaining integrity and focus when there's some kind of conflict.
I love that question because I think that integrity is, for me, it's foundational for everything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's Glennon Doyle who I've heard say like it's when your insides match your outsides. Like are your
Mm,
behaviors and actions on the outside matching your values that you hold true on the inside? So I mean, step one is get really clear on what are your values and and how do they show up at work. Oftentimes when there's a conflict at work that really inflames us in a way that might even feel disproportionate to what happened, it's because like a value was stepped on. So it's
right.
it's helpful to get clear on what those values are first and say like, oh, okay, I realize that the reason I'm responding in such a huge way is because this value is very core to who I am. So spend time to get clear on your values. There's exercises to do that I think are helpful, and sometimes I do that with coaching clients. And then
Mm,
from there, for workplace, I think it's also really helpful ahead of time before you choose a job. You can use this even as a lens through which to make a choice about where you go to work. Um, get really clear on like what you will not tolerate. And sometimes you just don't know. Like I will no longer tolerate a toxic workplace, but that's a luxury for me for where I am in my career that I have that
right.
choice. Sometimes we just don't have that
Yeah,
choice and we have
true.
to suck it up and tolerate. Um, but like bullying and abuse and stuff like that, that's a I will not tolerate that. But there's a spectrum, right? There's like absolute clearly toxic behavior, unethical behavior, unlawful behavior. And then over here is like, the ideal workplace. And probably most of us are working with something that's kind of in between where it's like, this guy's kind of a jerk. He's not really stepping on my values. He's just like really difficult, or he's hoarding power, he's hoarding information. There's so many permutations of what that might look like.
Right.
So I like that Miguel was talking about like how do you uphold your integrity. I think I have found that over my career and even over my life, um, no matter how difficult a situation is, if I show up in a way that's aligned with my values, even if it's like a complete disaster, like it's just like that was awful, terrible, terrible things are happening around me, happening to me. If I'm like
Mm-hmm.
living in my values, that's always something I can feel proud about. Where I'm just like, wow, that sucked, but I'm really proud of how I showed up for that. Like I could
Yep.
have. I'm thinking of situations where I could have like put someone on blast, right, and been like, this person did this. I could have gossiped. I could have become the toxic one, like spreading information. Um, I could have made some low blows. I could have undermined someone's career with information about them, and I didn't do that because I wanted to uphold my values. And so coming away from it, um, it's like the negativity of that experience has a more limited half-life. I actually think when I don't show up in line with my values, the negativity sticks with me longer because then it's like now you're dealing with shame, and
Right.
regret. So
Yeah.
I hope there's something helpful there. He's talking specifically about conflict resolution. Oh no, politics while maintaining your integrity. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we can get into. I'm curious to see if there's other questions about navigating politics because that's sort of like a weird special
Yeah, we got a
interest
few.
area of mine. Okay, cool. But
Yeah. Well,
I
I
think, yeah.
sorry, I want to follow up on something you mentioned.
Mhm.
Exercises. Is it worth talking about some of those exercises right now? Kind of thinking through that, or is it
Yeah, I
maybe
mean, I
too
can
much
give
to
like
get
a
into that now?
really I can try to do a quick like 30, 60-second version of one. It'll be a bit ham-fisted because it's sort of off the top of my dome. But one exercise that a friend of mine took me through a couple years ago was, you know, and do it on paper. Like get time offline, no screens, pen and paper, and think about like who are the people in your life that you really admire and write their names down. It almost works better when you don't know what's coming, like what this exercise is leading to, but think about those people that you admire and then think about like what is it about the way that they show up? What is that you admire in them? And these might be friends, family, celebrity designers. Even if you don't really know the person, you might say like, but it's something about the way that they're showing up that I really admire. And
Mhm.
from there, you can start to tease out a list of sort of like aspirations or values, or like, that's kind of how I want to show up as well. Like, this person is crazy dependable. I want to be a dependable friend. I want to be trustworthy. I want to be ethical. So that's sort of the start of starting to tease out some values. There's lots of different exercises, but that's a quick, super quick, like, how do you start to get some direction on them?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's and I assume when you do your coaching, you probably get a little bit more in depth with some of those
Yeah.
exercises. So we don't want to
Yeah.
spill the beans today, but yeah, so that's awesome. I love that. We do have some other questions actually related
Sure.
more about sort of politicking and this they
Mm-hmm.
mentioned specifically like managing up and out, but I'm kind of I think that's sort of all related. We got some questions about stakeholder management too, which I think is really important for enterprise work, especially when you got like big, large orgs, stakeholders who might not even know each other, might not be on the
Yeah.
same team, don't agree. All right, so let's see. Trying to find where was it? I'm like jumping around now, so I'm like have to
Sure.
find my questions. Let's see. Well, I don't. We'll find it. I'm sure it's. We got like 20 questions. I got a lot of questions. All right. Can you share some tips on building cross-functional relationships within a large enterprise setting? They're
Mm.
thinking. Oh, this was from Casey, by the way. Specifically, some tips when you get pushback or stakeholders in other orgs that are always busy or unavailable. So that happened.
Mm.
That's happened to me a lot. Where the
Yeah.
advice is build relationships with stakeholders. What happens when they aren't around? They don't want to reciprocate that
Yeah.
relationship. That's kind of what I'm assuming they're talking about here.
Okay, that's great. I'm just making a note of that. Thanks, Casey. These are great questions. So, one of the tips that I have is to try to work asynchronously. Like, you can assume
Mm.
that it's true. Like, stakeholders in the large scale enterprise companies are often overburdened with meetings. Especially, I'm thinking for designers, um, we often want to make sure our work is aligned with what leadership has given in terms of direction. They're going to be incredibly busy. There'll be triple booked with 11 meetings per day. I can tell you from experience. And same with product managers, right? Product managers are
Mhm.
this intersection point of like almost like every single domain across the whole organization. So they're also very, very booked, and they're maintaining their own set of stakeholders. So how can you move some of this communication to async? And I think one of the most powerful ways that designers can do that, like, first, we have this great benefit of our work being visual and visually compelling and engaging potentially, as opposed to like, here's the 30-page doc, will you read it and leave comments? So we have the benefit of just having stuff that's like really visually engaging. So instead of just sending a link to a Figma file via email and saying like, hey, just leave some comments in the file, I loved it. Some of my designers did this at LinkedIn. I loved it when they would record a Loom, or you
Mhm.
you can use Zoom, you don't have to use Loom, but record a video. Maybe it's got your little like headshot in the corner. That's always nice to add a personal touch. And it's you going through the Figma file and narrating and saying like, okay, they're going to land on this page. Here's the business rules behind the scene, maybe speaking through some of the logic, and just give like a 3-minute video walkthrough of the work,
Mhm.
and send the Figma link. So if they want to go in depth, they can. But you're always with, especially with executive stakeholders, you're always trying to lead with like the bottom line up front. Like, what's the bottom line? What's the most important thing you need to know? And if you can do that with a asynchronous video, one, it saves the meeting burdens. They will appreciate you. I think maybe some folks won't like the video as much. It'll really resonate for some people depending on their learning style. But if you come to be known as a person who's not just always dropping more meetings that weren't necessary on someone's calendar,
Yeah.
like, there are
Right.
those people too. There's an archetype of like, I need more FaceTime, FaceTime, FaceTime. And you're
Yeah.
like, that meeting did not need to happen. And I'll be totally honest, like, as a busy leader, like, you start to kind of resent those people, and that like um it's like that reputation follows them around. So the next time they put a meeting on your calendar, you're kind of like skeptical. You're like, does this
Yeah,
really need
everybody's
to be a
rolling their
meeting?
eyes. Yeah.
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 So it's weird, right? It's a balance. But if you can come to be known as the person who's not increasing the meeting burden unnecessarily and finding new creative ways to communicate, um, your stakeholders actually want to be looped in on what's going on, so they'll appreciate it. They don't want you to go away and work in secrecy for 3 months and do a big reveal.
Right.
And it has the added benefit of, I mean, one, you've kind of just created a portfolio piece for yourself. It's like you won't be able to share those things publicly, but it's directionally like the start of a portfolio piece that you can use in the future. Like imagine in two
Mhm.
years when you're putting together your portfolio, you're like, what was that project about? If you could watch your own 3-minute video just to refresh yourself, that's helpful. But more importantly for today, you're basically watermarking your own work with your face, your voice, your name, and you're actually helping to build your reputation, build your credibility, build relationships, those asynchronously, instead of an anonymous Figma file where it gets completely decoupled from who you are, because you want to be the person who's carrying your work and delivering it. And if you can't do it in person in a meeting, async via video, where you're the one speaking through the work, no one can strip that away and kind of claim credit for your work, or it doesn't have that like drift of like, who even did this work? Who knows? It's just anonymous Figma files.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So here's a question. This is not submitted. This is just me asking.
Yeah.
I had a call a couple weeks ago with somebody in a large enterprise. They were working in a bank, a large bank, and
Mm-hmm.
they were having trouble getting the attention of stakeholders to begin with. So
Yeah.
basically, what's happening, and then I'll set this up. It's they had a product manager who's giving orders. That product manager's
Mm-hmm.
having has the relationship with the stakeholders, the decision
Mm-hmm.
makers, and they're leaving the designer out. So the
That's
question they
tough.
had
Yeah.
was like, how do I get the attention of the stakeholder and have start to build a relationship with that stakeholder whenever I try to reach out to them, they ignore me or they blow me
Yeah.
off, because
Hmm.
it's sort of like a game of telephone. Like you end up
Totally.
having to, so I don't know. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are there, like how you might manage that. Cause I've had that happen to me working at
Yeah.
a giant company too. I'm curious, what do you do there?
Totally. That's really rough. And I think that's happened to me early in my career too, where it's like, okay, the PM is going to be the one that takes your work output
Hmm.
into the meeting. You're not even going to go to the meeting. The PM will present your work on your
Right. Yeah,
behalf, and you
exactly.
hope they mention your name. Who knows if they even will? So it sounds like in that scenario, the PM is kind of um, being a little bit protective of their own stakeholders, or
Yes.
even like trying to create like little fiefdoms and like hoard
Hmm.
power, hoard access. That totally happens too, which is really crappy. Um, Especially it's like, listen, like you need to take a leap of faith and give some early career people a chance to have a platform and give them a chance and help them prep and invest. Like I'm just like, our work is fundamentally collaborative, and so in my point of view, this is one of my values at work is like, um, there's an unspoken contract that I have with all the people that I work with that I am investing in their careers. And a product manager, you may not report to a product
Yeah.
manager, but they're a leader. If you're a leader at a company, what are you doing if you're not helping to invest in people's careers, especially early career people who are trying to get their footing? So that's just like a beef of mine. So when I see people hoarding power, excluding people, presenting other people's work on their behalf, they're stepping on my values. So I'm already a little fired up about this scenario. I mean, it sounds like a lazy answer, but the first step I would take is to talk to your boss, and hopefully you've got a good manager, and say, this is the scenario.
Right.
I'm not able to get any access directly to the stakeholder. Everything's getting fed through the PM. It's placing a lot of trust in the PM, right? That you're getting clean signal back from them. And
Yeah.
if they're the type of PM that's hoarding power, that would also undermine my trust in their ability to share. Because they might be like, yeah, the stakeholder said they wanted the red button. And really, secretly, it was the PM that wanted the red button all along. Um, yeah. So there's other stuff you could do that could be more inflammatory. Like if it's a highly political environment, you could do what we were talking about. It's like share that video with the executive stakeholder. You're CCing the PM, you're CCing your manager, so everybody's looped in. But the PM, depending on how toxic they are, they might see that as you trying to like work around them, undermine their ability to manage their stakeholders. Um, I think that sometimes you see this behavior earlier in their career. So if they're more junior, they're less confident about stakeholder management. And so they want to be really tight and
Mm.
controlled with stakeholder management. But then once they get a little deeper into their career, they can help you with that and make sure you're getting more exposure. But early on, they're just like, everything needs to be really buttoned up and tight. And how do I control it to make sure that I'm aware and in control of every bit of signal that goes to that exec? Um, yeah, hopefully
Yeah.
there's something helpful in there. But if nothing else, I appreciate the challenge because it definitely happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's something that the way I kind of think about this, and the advice that I gave them was just to your last point is those product management. When someone does that, it usually means they're nervous or scared of something, or they're
Yeah,
worried,
yeah,
or they don't trust you. right?
Yep.
They don't trust you to deliver, so they're going to do it for themselves. And I always
Hmm.
like to try to assume positive intent. And I think this is
Yeah.
where, if you can't build a relationship with the stakeholder, you can start trying to build a relationship with that product manager. And
It's
hopefully
great.
you're
Yeah.
working together over time and you're starting to build that trust. And maybe you do
Hmm.
deliver that one button that needs to be read because they asked for it, and you do that to build the trust. And then, over time they start to believe that you can do the work, and they can kind of hand things off to you, and they trust you to run a meeting, or they trust you to talk to the stakeholder directly. But I think
Yeah.
it's sort of one of those things. It's like, I kind of think of it as sort of like a map in a way, and like I'm stuck at this like crossroads, and I can't go
Hmm.
around this thing, so I got to go through this thing. How do I go through this roadblock or whatever? And can I improve that relationship with this person before I can go and improve the relationship with the next?
That's
And
so good. That's so
I don't
important.
know,
I
that's kind of my
Yeah.
thought.
I jumped way far ahead. Yeah, it's like start with your integrity and your values. Now, when it's time to start collaborating, build trust, right? Like that's
Yeah.
step number one when you're onboarding to a new company, when you're rotating and onboarding into a new team. It's so critical that you establish rapport and start building trust and show that you're someone who's trustworthy, who has integrity, that's credible, that delivers on time, that follows through. Um, and that's just like your foundation for all the collaboration that's going to happen after. And designers also have an opportunity to help demonstrate value to their PMs early. Like oftentimes there's almost like this overlap, right? Like the more senior or strategic you become as a designer, you start to kind of encroach on PM world. So if you're doing like discovery style research, that starts to look a lot like PM activities. And like I said,
Mhm.
these PMs are always overburdened, they're overloaded with work. So if you can start to take some of the research activity off their plate or partner with them on research, that's a great way to like uh, build some rapport, build some credibility, build some trust, and demonstrate that you're here to be a partner. Um, yeah, that's so important. Just building trust first and foremost.
Yeah. Yeah, I had an interview, I guess, like 2 weeks ago, with Caden Damiano, and he said something that I just was, like, so insightful. But it was, these stakeholders, they wanna be seen, they wanna feel seen, they wanna feel heard, and they wanna feel
Hmm.
understood,
Yeah,
and
so
that goes
human.
for product managers too. I mean, it's just like at the end of the day, like, we're talking about big enterprise orgs, but it's
Hmm.
just people. They're humans. They're
Yeah,
humans that you have to figure out how to, manipulate's the wrong word.
yeah.
Influence sounds dirty,
have
but,
empathy. It's like all your same design
yeah,
skills. It's like these are your
exactly.
users. These are the
Exactly.
recipients of your work output. So how do you understand their
Exactly.
behaviors, motivations, goals? How do you develop empathy for them?
Yeah. So I want to shift a little bit. This question is similar to the last one, but it's more about stakeholder management. This one's from
Cool.
Ethan. So, how do you approach stakeholder management, especially when you have a set of stakeholders who maybe seem stuck in their ways?
Ugh.
So in the last one, we didn't have access to them, and this question is more, they're sort of stuck in their ways. Maybe they're not used to working with UX teams. And
Mm,
what I'm thinking in my head is, this is the stakeholders just like, I want this to look this way. I know how it goes. Because I think
yeah.
something that's interesting, a lot of people might not realize in enterprise, at least in my experience, the stakeholders tend to be the people who did the work. Especially if you're
Mm,
building software for work for
yeah.
enterprise users, they did the work. So now, oh, they were really good at the work. Let's let them tell us how to build the software. So they a lot of times they never even built software before. At least in my experience, place like GE, for instance. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, tips there when the stakeholders standoff are stuck in their ways.
Uh
How do
huh.
you how do you handle that stakeholder management?
Oh man. Yeah, I've had this go well. I've had to go poorly. Sometimes it takes, especially in enterprise, sometimes it just takes a really, really long time.
Yeah.
Again, you're starting with building trust, building credibility, adding value, building that relationship and understanding where they're coming from. Try to get a bit of the history of like how was it done before, and like what's the gap between their vision of where they'd like to be in terms of how they develop product and where they are today. And if they're like, we're totally happy with how we build product today and we're set in our ways, that's going to be difficult, right? But if they're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
actually, I do have some aspirational companies, I love the way that this company operates, that could be the beginning of a wedge where you try to start understand like how can I be a partner to you to close that gap and get this organization delivering in that aspirational way. um, yeah, sometimes people like, it's really tough, right? Because if a product development organization has been well established before design has been introduced, which is very common, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Um, Oftentimes, they don't see your existing stakeholders that you're starting to partner with. They don't see a problem with the way that they're operating. And
Why can't it be
so
a smart sheet? I don't understand. Why can't you make another smart sheet?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And just why would you talk to customers? Why would you observe how they're solving this problem today? Um, yeah, so it there can actually be like active disdain for your
Mm,
presence. And then that's why we see so much conversation about like how do we explain the ROI of design, and how do
yeah.
we're still talking about the ROI of design 16 years after like
Right.
the iPhone changed everything, like the consumerization of IT and everything else. So it's a very tired conversation because it continues to be a problem. And it's because designers often are hired by a hiring manager who understands the value of the role and has made the case for the budget. But then the designer is landing on a team with maybe PMs, senior engineers, folks who have been at the company for 10, 20 years, people who are way more senior than the designer. They're like
Right.
outmatched, they're way
Yeah.
less senior, they might be early career designers. It's a completely unfair situation, that dynamic where you're like, I'm expecting a designer who's 2 years into their career, who's in their early 20s, to go toe to toe with this like 50 something principal architect who
Right.
doesn't
Right.
understand why I'm here. And so then you're
Yeah.
not even talking about product or project. You're talking about like, why are you here? And you're
Yeah.
defending your presence on the team. Um, so it's a really difficult place to be. I'd say like, if you can suss out those situations ahead of time before taking a role, it's great. And it's
It's so
also
hard
great
to
to
do.
talk to that higher. It's hard, right? Like a
Yeah.
lot of the advice I would give is like, yeah, that would be nice if I could like have my choice of jobs right now, but it's really hard to get a job right now. So all
Yeah.
this advice changes to like, what's the extreme pragmatic view until the economy improves and jobs improve. Um, so I would say I'm trying to think of some specific examples where like I was able to turn it around. I don't want to name orgs, but I did enter an org where it was very much that scenario where like the hiring manager totally believed in my presence, but nobody
Hmm.
else that I was, maybe not nobody else, but some of my key partners that I was there to work with did not see the value, did not, they were not the ones that hired me or chose for me to be there. And even some of the key partners thought that I had taken part of their role away from them. It's like sort of like
Oh
giving
wow.
away your Legos
Yeah.
idea of like when the
Yeah.
company's
Yeah.
growing, some of your job gets cleaved off because there's no way you can scale with that scope as the company grows. Um, so folks like in leadership, like actively undermining me, hoarding power, hoarding information. Um, and it just took one, the having a great boss who was advocating for me and helping to advocate on my behalf to senior leadership. And it just took years. Like it took
Just
years
being
of me
like,
being
yeah.
like so hardcore and so like,
Yeah.
you don't understand. I'm an endurance athlete, like I can go hard and I can just keep going, whether or not it's good for my health. So sometimes it's not like a quick turnaround, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's
What
something
about
I
you?
think
You
with.
might have better advice. I
Yeah,
feel
well,
like you've
I have
been,
some thoughts. So, the thing I was gonna say first is I think the main difference between something enterprise versus a startup, and I don't even know, Fang might be different because I don't know if they always think. I think they tend to be a little bit faster based on some of the people that I've talked to, but large enterprise orgs like a GE or a Cisco, it tends to be a marathon, like you said. It's your endurance. It's not just like how
mhm.
fast can we get there. It's like how long can we last a lot of times.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think that's something to keep in mind. It's like I talked about this in our interview, but I came from a startup to a place like GE, and I'm trying to like we can deliver, 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 and they're whoa, slow down, Junior.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, I think that's just that mindset, I think is important to just have that kind of reframe. But the thing that I was kind of
Yeah.
thinking about, and this is something that I kind of learned over my career as I got more into the strategy side, doing stuff like service design, is
Mm,
when designers come in, a lot of times they'll be like, what do we need to have on the page? What do we need to see? What do what's the whatever? And they're thinking like, what's the problem this app is trying to solve, right?
mm.
And what I think I learned over time was before you do any of that, stakeholder interviews is something service designers would do a lot. Stakeholder
Yeah.
interviews, and not asking them what the problem the app is doing, but what problem do you have?
Yeah.
What problem do you see? And that's where you start to understand the stakeholders and start to build that empathy because again, like the problems they have might have nothing to do with the software. It might be, oh, I got this other executive breathing down my throat, deliver, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah. And you start to get a sense for why they're asking for the things when they're asking for and why
Yeah.
they're prioritizing the things that they're prioritizing.
Mhm.
Because very rarely an enterprise has anything to do with end users.
I know,
Unfortunately.
sadly.
At least when when I say enterprise, I don't mean big enterprise orgs. I mean more of the, enterprise software for work and stuff.
B2B. Yeah.
Yeah, B2B type stuff. So, that's the kind of thing in internal tools where, the
Yeah,
users tend to
it's good.
be an afterthought. And I think those state like approaching it that way and understanding the people in charge of making the decisions and understanding all of that gives so much more context to what color does the button need to be and what needs to be on the
Totally.
page and stuff and when is it supposed to be delivered.
Yeah.
And that allows you, I think, to have more creative ideas on problems like, well, you're saying this, but based on the thing you said, maybe we could do this other thing, or maybe we could only do this, or maybe we only need an MVP. We don't need to build all this stuff. Maybe we could do
Hmm.
some other simple test.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of my thought there is like dealing with those
Yep.
stakeholders and understanding where they're coming from. Because if they're stuck in their ways, that really helps you understand why those ways are set that way.
Yeah.
And
I
then
mean,
you can
all this
figure out how
stuff.
to go around it.
Yeah. So much of this stuff comes down to um, what are the underlying incentive structures that are in place that are
Hmm.
motivating the behavior of these folks. And sometimes it's like, oh, they have like personal trauma that they've brought to the workplace. That happens too. So you won't have as much of a view into that. But it's like, okay, if someone's quarterly bonus is did they ship the thing, yes or no, they might be less bound to quality, for example, or craft. Um, and I think there's questions you can ask during the interview process as well to start to gauge how healthy the org is and how willing it is to metabolize great design. So if you're lucky enough to have one-on-one interviews with cross-functional partners, which hopefully you do, I would ask for that if you're able to. Like, can I interview with the PM that I'd be working with?
Hmm.
Um, Ask them about their history of working with design. Like, if you get the chance
Yeah.
to ask them questions, and I'd also do this when you're interviewing potential candidates, is like, tell me about a time when you had a great collaboration with design and what did that look like? What do you attribute to that success? Or tell me about a time when you had a really, really difficult time collaborating with design and like, what do you attribute that to? What would you do differently? You might also, you can even do that internally, right? If you're just starting to work with a new partner, these are great like first conversation
Oh yeah,
questions to ask.
exactly.
And like, if you could wave a magic wand, what's one thing that you would be able to, like, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing overnight about how design functions in this org, what would it be? That could be pretty insightful because it'll speak to like their pain points or their
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I like to ask when I do those initial conversations, and this is different from stakeholder interview type of scenario setting, but whenever I try to build relationships, we talked about asynchronous work, but I think it's important when you first start working with someone to have a 30-minute conversation and you're
Mm-hmm.
talking to them and trying to get to know them personally. One of the questions I like to ask is, what is your expectation for me?
Yeah.
How do you see
Yeah.
me being effective and how can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
And then vice versa, you say like, this is my expectation. This is how I expect you, and setting those expectations up front, because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times the conflict comes from just mis expectations being off and
Yes.
people expecting one
Yes.
thing when so a lot of times it's not even just people being jerks. It's just expectations weren't set correctly, I think.
And then
So
people
that's
being
something else I like to
indirect
do.
with
Yeah.
resolving
Yeah,
conflict. They get a third party
exactly.
involved and
Wanting
start
to avoid.
triangulating
Yeah.
because they're avoiding. But I really like that you followed up too about like, well, here's my expectation of how I can
Hmm.
work with you. Because I
Yeah.
think without that piece, um, we have to honor the fact that in big scale enterprises, power plays a role and hierarchy does
Hmm.
often play a role. It's
Yes.
inevitable. And I think sometimes if you're coming in a little bit too demure and a little bit too like, how can I meet your needs? How can I meet?
Yeah.
I'm all about servant leadership. I'm all about
Uh-huh.
like design serving the customer and the org. Um, but I also want people to like maintain their own personal power. So the whole like, how can I work effectively with you? And then like, here's my expectations from
Mhm.
you. It's a two-way street. It's a contract
Yeah.
that you're entering into, but you're also implicitly um, saying like, I have certain expectations of you as a partner,
Yeah.
and you might even use that conversation as an opportunity to say like, hey, I believe in like directly resolving conflict. If I have an issue with you or something you've done, I'm going to come to you immediately. I'm going to do it privately. I'm not going to put you on blast. I'm not going to go and gossip to someone else.
Right.
And my hope is that you would do the same to me, however small. Just come to me right away before it's a big thing. Let's hash it out because I'm invested in this relationship. um,
Yeah. I
that's
love
awesome.
that.
That's something you can do in your first role. That's a scary conversation to have, but if you're like entry level designer, you'll look so mature and professional if you do that and have that conversation. It's also so healthy to have that conversation before conflict arises and say, let's both agree
Yeah.
how we'll handle conflict. Because then you can have the meta conversation later about like, hey, you gossiped to me about this person. I thought we agreed we'd bring stuff to each other directly.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's something I say too a lot is, you can't build great software without great relationships, and I
Mm,
think the reason there is, software is hard, just in
yeah,
general. It's just really
yeah,
hard, mostly because of the people and the
yeah,
politics and the
yeah.
difference in opinions, but, having great relationships, one of the reasons why I think it's important because you're inevitably going to have hard conversations, and
Hmm.
those relationships and setting those things up front make those hard conversations so much
Mm,
easier.
hmm.
You know? So, anyway, so I think that's just like a beautiful thing. I love your advice there. So I want to shift. We've been talking about this for a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about portfolios and
Okay,
some
let's do
LinkedIn
it.
stuff. We've got
Let's do
about
it.
22 minutes left, and I got some fun
Great.
this or that questions for you towards the end that I want to ask. Real quick before we move on though, this might take a little bit of time, but Marty, shout out to Marty, Patreon sponsor. Thank you for your
Hi,
support, Marty. I
Marty.
appreciate that. She mentioned she's
Oh, awesome.
from going from startup, never worked in enterprise,
Yeah.
and it just sounds enterprise sounds big and impersonal, and it's basically kind of slow to connect in others outside of your role. So we had a question
Yeah.
that was kind of related to what Marty's suggesting, and I think she might find value in this. So I don't know, Marty. I
Hmm.
hope I hope you find value in this. But this was a question from Xavier in the context of large matrixed organizations. What are some
Hmm.
strategies for successfully managing up and out across the teams and thinking mostly about how to keep your work and your team visible when
Hmm.
the rest of the company might have no idea what you're working on?
Yeah. Okay. I'm just making note of that.
Marty, hopefully this one
Yeah.
helps you give a little insight in enterprise.
Yeah. What's up, Marty? It's cool to see you in the chat. And she said her stakeholders, clients love the Loom video walkthroughs. Awesome. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So managing up and out, keeping the work and the team visible in the Matrix organization. Matrix is so hard. Matrix is like you've got your direct manager. Help me out,
Yeah.
Jeremy. You've got your direct manager, your solid
Dotted
line
lines, solid
reporting
lines.
to,
Yeah.
and then the demonic dotted line where it's
Yeah.
like maybe you're kind of pseudo reporting into
Yeah.
another leader. They're not responsible for your compensation
Right.
changes or your promotions or anything that they might do behind the scenes in Workday or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, matrix organizations are their own kind of beast and sort of
Right.
crazy making, in my opinion. I guess it has to happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm like, if I could avoid a matrix, I will. Um, but it's
Dotted line, solid line. Ugh. Just gives me flashbacks of G.
don't take me back there. Yeah, the dotted line, it's crazy making because you essentially end up with like two bosses. And if they're not
Right.
aligned,
Right.
you're the one suffering and they might not even be talking to each other. So that's really
Yeah.
tough. So that's its own beast is like the matrix. That's tough. But how do you maintain visibility in basically like a large scale org? How do you manage up and out? Um, let's see. So when I think about managing up, so this could apply to the solid line manager or the dotted line. Um, in my mind, managing up is just like how do you how do you align on what your I'll just say boss, whether they're dotted line or solid line for shorthand. How do you get clear on like what your boss's current goals are, what are their objectives and what are they being measured on? And that's a conversation, right? It's like what are their current OKRs? What does leadership expect from them? How is performance in their role being measured? And you can ask them these things um, and try to get clear on like what's motivating their behavior, what dynamics are at play behind the scenes, what dynamics are creating pressure for them, because it'll help to clarify a lot of their behavior that you see. And it'll help you align your work to make sure whatever you're delivering rolls up to what they're responsible for delivering to the broader org. Um, and so getting clear on that and then continue, that's sort of like the starter. And then the continual managing up is proactively pushing information up and out. So like, what are the different techniques you can use to proactively push information to your boss? And oftentimes the same techniques could be used to push information out.
Mm,
So and it should be iterative, just like product development. It's like, here's your MVP. Maybe you Slack your boss 2 days before the one-on-one and like, here's a bulleted list of what's going on in my world. I'd love to spend some time at the one-on-one going deep on this question. But you're asking for feedback. Like, how is that level of information? How is this frequency of information? What about the format? Would you prefer it in email so you have like a permanent place that you can go and find this information? Because essentially what you're trying to do is help equip them to have the information they need to manage up to their boss because they will inevitably have to do the same thing. So you're creating this like upward chain, this like linking chain. Um, and so some of the finesse there comes in the granularity and the level of detail. So it's like you don't want to overwhelm your boss with way too much information. How do you boil it down and tell them just what's critical right now? Is there anything blocking? Did you uncover anything really interesting that's going to pivot the approach based on research? Um, what's the next step, how is it performing in the market, how's your product performing in the market. So you might start with like, I would advise don't start with paragraphs of text. Again, these are busy people. Start with like bulleted
Oh, that's yeah.
lists that are scannable about like, here's what's going on high level. And you can always say like, let me know if you want more information. So generally you're trying to proactively push this information to your boss so that they're equipped, so that imagine like the next day they're in the hallway and their boss is like, hey, what's going on with that initiative? Or let's say their boss slacks them. What's going on with that initiative? They can pull up your Slack, copy
Yeah.
paste it, and send it to their boss.
I love
That's
that.
that's the best. That's like the
Yeah.
fidelity you want to get to, right?
Something
Um,
that my old boss used to do, he would create decks and just
uh-huh.
have like a slide, not a deck, just a slide ready.
Yeah. Yep.
And if someone asked for something, he would just boom, here's your slide, and
Yeah.
because they would take that slide and shove it in their own deck, and then they would
Yeah.
report out
Yeah.
or whatever. And that kind of stuff, it's similar to what you're kind of talking about, but um, that makes it even easier for them because they don't have to go back and format it, and assuming you're using the
Totally.
same template. But anyway, I
Yep.
don't know. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I
No,
thought that was a good
that's
idea.
so good because some cultures are more slide deck oriented, some are
Yep.
more email oriented.
Hmm.
At LinkedIn, we had like a weekly roll up email newsletter from the entire design org that went all the way up to the CEO, and he read them.
Mm.
And they would include like links to prototypes or video walkthroughs, little high level research highlights, findings. But that all happened by way of roll up. So it's like first the team that I'm on, we submit through an Airtable our weekly updates. From there, I'm culling them and
Mm.
curating to send on to my boss, to send on to her boss, et cetera. So it takes a little bit of iteration. It takes some organizational awareness about what artifact type works the best in this org. Some orgs are super like Google Docs only, and they want long form and they want pages and pages of depth, very
Mm.
academic style. So that's also something you ask your boss about, like what is the artifact that my stakeholders to the side will most likely resonate with, or you can just ask your stakeholders.
Yeah, one of the things my boss used to do, and this is, I'm saying like my boss used to do it, but there's no reason why a team couldn't get together and just do it if, doesn't have to be the boss directing this. This could be more
Mm-hmm.
organic. But on Friday afternoons, he would just send a shout out email with like, here's all
That's
the stuff
cool.
that our team did this week,
Yeah.
and if it impacted a team, he would, tag them
Mm-hmm.
in Outlook or whatever, and they would get a little notification, hey, you've been tagged in the thing. But
Yeah. That's
they would do
nice.
that and then share that with the larger distribution list, and people would see what was going on. I don't know how many people actually opened it and read it, but if one or two people did, then I think it was a win. All
Totally.
right, we could probably talk about this topic, I think, at length, but I want to get into how to share your work as an enterprise designer. So,
Okay.
Ingrid asked a good question. So, and this is something I've experienced personally myself, but for people working in large enterprise or B2B software, the projects are usually very large.
Mm-hmm.
They might cover years.
Yeah.
Working on the same product, multiple features, but just the same product. So, what are some effective ways to showcase those complex, long-term projects on your resume or on a portfolio? Given everybody says, quote unquote, keep your case study short. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you showcase those big giant projects with like the 30-second elevator pitch?
Yeah. I'm assuming, I mean, anytime I worked in enterprise, we would have multi-year initiatives, but there would also be like sub projects within. And so, right, like it would be kind of crazy to be like, maybe you worked on stuff at GE if you're working like
I did.
aviation or something. Maybe you do work on
Yeah.
stuff for like two
Yeah.
years, and there's one monolithic ship date.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
tough because
Yeah.
I would always work in software, right? So there were more like frequent feature releases,
Yeah.
which means that you're breaking it down into smaller projects.
Yeah.
Um, in which case, that smaller project can be the smaller morsel that goes into
Hmm.
your portfolio. But you can create the broader context of like, this was part of the larger initiative.
Right.
Um, and I always appreciate it too if designers can speak to a little bit of like, how is this project situated in the larger business? Meaning like, what's happening in the market right now? Like, what are the competitive forces that are creating pressure on our business, for example, that's leading us to pursue this initiative? Maybe there's a competitor that's kind of cannibalizing some part of our business, and so we're responding in this way. These are the types of things you learn from going to your all hands and listening to how your CEO or CTO
Hmm.
or any of the C-suite talking about what's going on long term in the business. Um, those are talking points you want to use to frame the story, and then you're going to present the smaller project morsel. But the fact that you've created that frame first around like, here's what's happening to us as a business. Here's the reason we're pursuing this. We have conviction or a hypothesis internally that if we pursue this initiative, here's the impact to the business. And so therefore, here's a small project, this is the reason why we're doing it. I think a lot of, instead of just saying like, here's a dashboard, like a lot of enterprise work
Yeah.
or portfolios, it's just like, here's some like data
Just some data viz
visualization.
thing. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, cool. And increasingly like that, I'd love to see nice data visualization, I guess, but there's so many like templates and stuff like that out there. I'm like,
Right. Thing is a
I,
huge
I don't
buy.
really know. Yeah, what is this actually telling me about your skill level? So being able to frame it in the broader like market context for enterprise is really helpful.
Yeah. So there's other questions here too. We only have like 10 minutes left. I kind of want to just keep going. Do you have a hard stop or anything?
I do. I have like
You
a
do?
crazy day. This is kind of fun.
Okay.
It's reminding me and making me appreciate what it was like to work in-house full time as a leader because I'm like back to back to back today and I'm having fun
Yeah.
with it, but I'm also like, how did I do this for like a
Oh my
decade?
God. Do you remember though when we were in an office and you had back-to-back meetings, it meant you were late for every meeting because you had to walk across the floor, another elevator. He's like, or you had to leave the
No,
last meeting early to get to the next one on time.
I know. My
Those
joke
were the
is always
days.
like, I need like the shoes that runners use and a camelback and adult diaper, and then I'll be just get rid of all my
You
human.
yeah, or just coffee in the thing though. It has to have coffee in
Yeah,
it.
yeah. The like helmet with the beer can, there's two copies.
Like a Starbucks logo on it. Oh, that'd be so
Oh,
funny. You
good
should actually
idea.
Starbucks. It sounds like an opportunity. So we had some other questions here about some stuff related to portfolios.
Mhm.
I don't know. These are really interesting questions, but
Okay.
those last one that I'm going to follow up your last answer with just some thoughts I had, and I want to get your take
Yeah.
on it. But you asked about like at GE, building this stuff, and so here's something really interesting, right? With a lot of the stuff that we were doing, we were digitizing paper processes, and I can't speak at
Mm.
length about it, but there was
Yeah.
paper, just everything was paper across the
Mhm.
board, start to finish, and it was hundreds and hundreds of people touching a piece of paper through the course of this
Wow.
project, and so you can't just digitize one part of that
Mhm.
and release it. There has to be a digital format for almost everything before you can even release it to a single person often.
Well,
And so we had ideas on how we could do that. Ultimately, COVID hit, they canceled the project altogether because they needed to save money. Aviation industry, obviously depends on travel. Nobody was
yeah.
traveling. And so it died. And so what happened, this was really interesting. I worked on this project for 2 years. Aviation scrapped it, never released it, but Power took it, right?
Mm.
And we were working on this like multi
Yeah.
weird. I don't know. I'm talking as if you know the context, but it
Power,
was two
GE
business units
makes
were
like
sharing the
wind
software.
turbines and stuff. Okay. Yeah.
Gas turbines, yeah. So they were basically. When you think about gas turbine and a jet engine, they're actually almost
Yeah.
identical technologies. Really interesting
Oh,
stuff. So
cool.
anyway, Power and Aviation both using it. Power took it and went and did their thing, and they released it, and it's all over the world. Thousands
Neat.
of users, 10 shops and all these like giant electric companies are using that software to manage and track their jobs and all that stuff. Aviation scrapped it. I went with
Mhm.
aviation. I didn't go Power. So I worked for
Yeah.
like 3 years on this project, 3 or 4 years on this project, and I have absolutely no insight into how it's being
How
used,
it
what's happened.
performs.
So,
Yeah.
like, my portfolio is essentially a year's worth of work that went nowhere. And I have,
Mhm.
some metrics based on usability studies and time on task studies, and we made estimates and stuff. But I'm kind
Yeah.
of curious from your perspective that I feel like that happens. I've talked to other enterprise people that have worked on something and the project gets scrapped and it never gets released. I'm curious, how do you show that work when you have no proof that any of it was useful or
Uh-huh.
used, or you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Values, you can't prove it. What do
Yeah,
you do?
I mean, that it happened to me at Yahoo, like, one of the coolest things I ever got to work on there just got scrapped. It was just, like, deprioritized and
Mm,
got and I was, like, so bummed, and I'd put so much time into it, and I was like, "I can't show anybody." That one, I couldn't show anybody. I can't really talk about it. So I had to choose different projects. Yours is different because it went live out into the world, so I suppose you can't talk about specific metrics post release, because we
mm,
love to talk about like, here's how, we had a hypothesis about how it would
yeah.
perform. Here's the metrics lift that we wanted to see, and here's how it did perform. That's ideal. I think you can still show a lot of that work if it's out in the wild. And in fact, um, places like GE, oftentimes, this is true for agencies too, they will oftentimes create a case study page talking about some new technology
Yeah,
that's just
they
been
do. Yeah.
released,
Hmm.
right? And that's public knowledge, it's out there. So it's
Hmm.
safe to cull from that and pull some of that language and use it. It's like you always want to be careful not to disclose anything that's proprietary because you could get in
Hmm.
hot water. Um, There's also this notion that you could sanitize and strip away the logo and say this is for a large multi conglomerate, but they're going to
Yeah.
be able to like triangulate and look at your LinkedIn profile
Yeah.
and kind of figure it out. So that's a bit dicey.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I would see like what is out there already based on press releases, based on case studies, and it probably is not going to be the types of internal metrics. But you can explain that. You know, you can say like,
Yeah.
I can't talk about internal metrics; it's private data. Um, it would be crazy if a hiring manager was like, "What? I don't understand that." If anything, you're
Yeah.
demonstrating to them that you're going to be sensitive with their private data in the future.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I've done is sort of broken up some of the larger scale product, obviously, into smaller features that were
Yeah.
individual pieces of the tool. And I could say, this is the order entry piece, and this is how we solved
Hmm.
it. And, we had this problem, and this was the problem, this was the solution. And based on time on task estimates, we saved blah, 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 which you could
Hmm.
extrapolate to be $50 million or whatever.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of interesting. I was thinking through some of this stuff, and, a lot of times, like, people are like, yeah, I don't know the value of this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, the cool thing about enterprise often, especially internal tools, is exactly how much a labor hour is,
Yeah.
and exactly how much time it takes to do something. And if you
Yeah.
can cut those hours, you can say, I saved the business like $100 million. And what's interesting is some of this stuff with the thousands of people who have been using this tool, I did the calculation. It was like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I was like,
Well, then you
I
got
only
to
get like
get
a
a small
$10,000
percentage
bonus.
of that. Like go to commission based grant.
Yeah,
Really
like
backfire.
like 0.5%, man. I would have killed for half of a percent on the return on that savings. Anyway, all right. So that's a really good. I like that a lot. Extrapolate. I think that's as important as being very sensitive to the data and not, maybe
Mhm.
maybe hide it behind a password or something. I don't know, but
If
I
it's
know people.
enterprise, sorry to interject. If it's a
Yeah,
public
go ahead.
company, like go listen to the boring earnings calls because they might actually talk about it there.
They probably do. Yeah.
You
All
should
right.
listen to the earnings calls. If you're working for a publicly traded company, you should listen to the earnings calls just while you're in Figma. Listen to they're boring, but there's a lot of stuff in there that's important for you to know.
That context, and it helps to build empathy too for those other people that are getting drilled on
Yeah.
things because of those earnings are low or whatever, and
Yeah.
it helps you, and then when you speak to them, they're like, oh wow, they know
Uh-huh.
business.
Uh-huh.
And then they trust you. Oh, they know business. All right. So this has been really good, Sally. Before we get out of here, I got some this or that questions that I want to ask. I'm going to
Ooh,
truncate these a little
cool.
bit because we only have
Okay.
5 minutes left. You have a hard stop at the
Cool.
hour, right?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Sorry.
make you late for your
I
next
usually
meeting.
don't.
Okay. No, that's all right. All right. So we'll just cut it off. If you got to jump, you could jump, and then I'll close out the stuff. All right.
Cool.
First up, this or that question. First thing that comes to your head. Don't think about it too
Okay.
much.
Okay.
Time travel to the past or to the future? You only pick one, and you
Oh,
can't come
future.
back. You can't come back.
Oh, I can't come back?
You can't come back.
Future.
Future. Okay.
I have a
I like
daughter.
it.
I need to see what she's up to. I don't want to go too far back before she's born.
But here's the thing. If you
Yeah.
leave, she doesn't, you like leave.
Oh
And she
no.
doesn't,
Oh,
yeah,
it's so
see?
upsetting, Jeremy.
I know. That's the parent. It's like you can't come back. So, like, it's not like Back to the Future. You come back right when you left.
I'll still go
She
future. I
never
think
sees
past
you
would be
again.
too emotional. Past would, I don't know.
It's hard.
Dang it.
All right.
I'll still say future. I just watched the Adam Project and it's all about time travel and I like
Yeah.
cried a surprisingly amount watching that movie. It's very
That was a
good.
good movie. That's a very
It's
good
really
movie,
good.
actually. I like it a lot. Netflix does some good stuff. All right. Would you rather eat pizza every day for a year, 3 meals a day,
Yeah.
or never eat pizza again?
Never eat pizza again. No problem.
That was easy. I eat pizza. All right.
I
Would you
pizza's
rather?
good, but like, ew, eating pizza. Imagine eating pizza all the time. It sounds disgusting.
But here's the thing: there's so many variations of pizza, though. You could have like
No,
Detroit, you could have thin crust, you could have all the different variations. All the okay,
dude,
I'm
I'm
with you.
lactose intolerant.
I
No
think at the
problem.
end of
I would
that, you
eat
would never want to eat pizza again anyway. So,
totally.
all right, would you rather be perpetually underdressed or perpetually overdressed for every occasion?
Like cold or like
So,
casual?
like you show up to a swimsuit, a pool party in a tuxedo,
Oh,
or you show up to a wedding in a bathing suit,
I
or
think I'm
something along the lines.
always, I think I'm always underdressed. So I think it would be funny to go overdressed for the rest of time.
That would
I'm
be
going
like a
tuxedo.
top
Can I
hat,
do
a
menswear?
tuxedo, and
That would be
tails.
fun. Yeah, little Janelle
Oh,
Monáe,
I love it. Like show up to like McDonald's and like a
Mr. Peanut.
top Mr. I love it. Yeah,
I
your
got a little
monocle. You got a
monocle.
monocle. All right. Would you rather have your life narrated out loud
Oh,
by
no.
Pauly Shore or Gilbert Gottfried?
Ooh,
May he rest in peace.
Pauly Shore. In fact, my team at Duo, I was very sick with COVID and got double lung pneumonia, and it was the whole thing. And my team sent me a cameo from Pauly Shore to cheer me up, and it was medicinal. It was deeply healing. Pauly
I
Shore for
love it.
sure.
Yeah, I like actually
Yeah.
like I remember Encino Man when I was a kid. I don't know. I've always liked
So
Pauly
good.
Shore. I know that's weird. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna close this one out. Last question. Would you rather conduct user research only, no speaking, only through interpretive dance or through
Ooh,
haiku poems? I said no speaking, but haiku poems.
dance for
Dance.
sure.
Like you could only dance. That was the only way you could conduct research.
I mean, I feel like anytime I'm messing around with like audio settings on a Zoom that's not working, I resort to like singing and dance. I'm like, can you see me? Can you hear? I think I did that on our call. I was like singing and dancing, just
I caught it.
and
I
working in
caught
the
it.
enterprise.
Gotta
It's a
make it
grind.
fun.
It can be quite boring. You got to add a sense of fun and play. And actually, that's a pro tip, right? It's like your colleagues are so bored too working in the enterprise that anything playful you can do that's surprising or creative or fun, they will so
Yeah.
deeply appreciate it. It's like
I
drinking
think
a well in a
I
desert.
can't remember if we talked about this on our interview, or maybe this was just a random call we had. But I had my Teams icon, my Microsoft 365 icon
Yeah.
avatar was the same me dancing in a Christmas sweater that I use on LinkedIn. And I had one time somebody on a meeting was like, "I love your profile. It's so fun. You look so fun. I just want to like go to a happy hour with you." And then she was like, "I
Like,
didn't
it
know we could
reminds me that fun exists.
She's like, I didn't know we
I
could
forgot
put
about
fun
fun.
pictures. I didn't know we could put fun pictures on our app." I'm like, why? Like nobody ever said
Yeah.
you couldn't. It's so funny. Anyway, all right.
Sometimes that's the role of design. Remind
Uh,
people that fun exists and to
that's
have
right.
joy and be
That's right.
playful.
All right, Sally. Well, we got another minute before we get out of here. Tell everybody where they can find you. Give yourself a plug, and then you can go
Yeah.
on and I can do my outro stuff.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy, and thanks for coming today, everybody. This was really fun. I hope it was helpful. Find me on LinkedIn, Sally Carson. Follow me there. I've got a link to my newsletter, and I just give the types of things we've been talking about today. I give tips about career strategies there.
Right on. All right, Sally. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out. I will give you permission. I will bid you adieu. Get on to your next meeting. I don't want to make you late.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks,
See you,
Jeremy.
Sally.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Well, now that Sally's out of here, we got nothing else to talk about. That's it for us for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on enterprise software working in those large enterprise orgs. And if you've been on the fence about exploring those opportunities at some of those big companies, I really hope that we've helped nudge you in the right direction. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Listen to Beyond UX Design. If you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it for the love of God? Help keep the show independent and ad free. Shout out to Marty. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, many others, and help keep the show independent and ad-free. And you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, even episodes before they're released. You can get all that instant access right now, starting at $5 a month. And if you've been sitting on building your new website, Wix Studio can help get you there faster. Wix Studio is a powerful platform that lets you create and manage websites easily. And with Wix Studio, you can quickly adapt designs for every device, reuse assets, and my favorite, export from Figma, and much more. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/Wix to learn more. You ready for that exclusive $20 coupon for Beyond UX Design? Master your craft beyond pixels and prototypes. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book. Use the promo code LIVE to get $20 off your copy and master all the things I didn't teach you in school. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX than design. We'll see you around. Take care, y'all.